Hey everyone, this is Amanda Moore from the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, and you're listening to the ASF Podcast, the show that explains everything you want to know about Angelman Syndrome. We're so excited you're here, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to our Angelman Syndrome Foundation podcast. I wanted to just say hello. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Catherine Ely. I'm the Family Resource Director here at ASF. And today we're going to be talking about something really important, and that's protecting our mental health during the holiday season. The holidays can be filled with so much joy and so much laughter and so much fun, but they can also really be overwhelming, especially for families caring with an individual with Angelman syndrome. And we think it's really important to acknowledge how the holidays can make us feel. And so we wanted to bring on our licensed family counselor, Shannon Barlow. We hope many of you know her already, but I'll let her introduce herself, but she's going to help us get through some of these holiday expectations over the next few weeks.
Shannon? Hello to everybody out there. I am Shannon Barlow. I'm the LCPC that's been working with the ASF for, I think, over 5 years now. I lose track of time, but it's been a long time, and I'm so glad to be on here with you today.
Thank you. And you have spoken, I think we've lost count, but we know we did, and last year alone, you did over 500 counseling sessions for those within the Angelman community. And I think we've lost count of how many families you've reached. Is it 300?
I think we have lost count. I think after it's been so many years, but I just want everybody out there to know, like, your families touch me and help me as much as I help them, because there is nothing more inspiring than talking with an Angelman family to me.
Well, and we'll plug you at the end for how people can get in contact with you. But I think one of the things that I know we and Amanda here at ASF are so proud of is just the focus on mental health and what you have brought to the community. And for those of you who don't know Shannon, you can schedule free counseling sessions via Zoom with her. And we will tell you how to do that before the session is over. So thank you for being here with us today. But let's dive in this holiday season. So let's start with the obvious. The holidays bring a lot of expectations, all of the different parties and the cookie decorating and the events, the perfect meals, the gatherings. It seems like sometimes it is in just overdrive at this time of year. Family photos, Christmas cards, but for our holiday cards. But for our families in our community, the holidays can feel like we're constantly juggling and trying to put together this Tetris game between sensory needs and disruptive routines and extra pressure. What advice do you give any of us who are trying to juggle everything we have going on right now?
Well, I think that it's hard for anybody, but in special needs families, it's almost impossible. I liked your comparison about the Jenga game, and sometimes I feel like you move one piece and everything's going to fall apart. So I think one of the keys is to keep your expectations really low. It's not going to be the perfect family photo, and it's not going to be the perfect family holiday, but it can be the one that's perfect for your family. And that may mean, doing less than other families, and it might mean doing more, but also, having cutoff times and making room for, outfit changes or some kind of crisis intervention. But at the same time, you want to modify your expectations. You don't want to say, we can't do anything, but if there is something you really want to do, try to figure out a plan that would make it successful for the whole family.
Almost like prioritizing the top things. I think we all go through a time in life where we want to say yes to everything. We want our kids to experience everything. And especially families who have both neurotypical kids and individuals with AS, or even some that have other special needs. It's hard to say yes to everything regardless. And so from what I'm hearing from you, being able to prioritize what's the most important for our family unit and try to make that happen.
Yeah, and I like that idea. Like, think of 3 things that you really want to accomplish over the holiday season and make that a priority. And if the other things happen, great. But, you know, if they don't, then that's still going to be a really nice holiday when you're not stressed out, when you're living within your financial means, when you're, giving your emotional energy to the people who recharge you instead of drain you. I think the holidays are hard. And I think also expect grief to be a part of the holidays. And it is something that I often hear identified as triggers of, seeing neurotypical family members and their children. And, when you go into it with the expectation of grief, and then if you can, prepare your family, let them know, like, we may choose to leave early. We may be sad. They don't need to cheer you up. They just need to give you space to grieve. And if you can figure out what would be helpful for you, then express that to the family members who are really wanting to help, because it is a gift to give your family just time and patience and space when you're grieving too.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up. And I speak with a lot of newly diagnosed families who they're just in the thick of it right now. They're trying to balance their life as it was prior to this diagnosis, understanding their child hasn't changed, but also looking at the life ahead and know that it is different. And when you say that you need to tell family members or tell friends not to just cheer you up, we hear that a lot too, is we don't always need a constant cheerleader. It's nice to have that. It's nice to have the people who can, try to help bring us up when we're down. But what are some good tips to tell families when you're just not okay and you need to sit with that for a minute, maybe even during the holidays when you see everyone else just running around and you're still just in this place of, this is still hard.
Yeah.
What are some good things to tell family members who mean well, who really do want to try to help, but sometimes it's okay to say it's not okay, or sometimes it's okay to not be okay. How do you express that though to families and to people who are closest to you?
Well, I think there are different levels. For the newly diagnosed, you might not have the emotional energy to figure out, who to talk to and who would be beneficial, and find the right words to say. So it's okay to even just, sometimes take 5 minutes to go to the bathroom and, make it an extra long time where you just breathe in a quiet place for a little while. And then when you do have the emotional energy, there's a skill called radical honesty. And that's how we tell people how it feels to be us. And so it is hard to say to, your brother who has a neurotypical kid, sometimes it's hard for me to be around your child without feeling, pangs of jealousy or anger or whatever the grief cycle feeling of the moment is. But if you can do that, then they understand a lot more how it feels to be you, or they tell you that they're never going to understand this, which is a hard thing for some family members. You try over the years to explain things to them, and you just have to accept that they're not going to understand this too. But I do think radical honesty, letting people know how it feels to be you, setting realistic expectations, knowing your triggers, which is a big word that we hear a lot, but then there's also knowing your glimmers, which is the opposite of a trigger. It's the things that bring us joy. And, some of the things that, it might be the simple things. It might be, the Christmas movies that you really like, or the Christmas songs, or, the quiet time, or the big pageant shows that you want to go to and know it might be a disaster, but it brings you joy to be there. So, I think trying to take control of what you can and give up control of what you don't have any control over, which is other people's feelings and their reactions.
I love that. I think we could all use some radical honesty a little bit more in our lives. I think everyone should adopt this philosophy. I remember when my son, who's 12 now, was younger, and we were being invited to all of the cookie decorating parties and the Grinch parties and whatnot. And we would go because I just felt this need to expose Stetson to all of that, or almost I felt this need for other families to see us out and about. We are fine. We can do this. And Stetson would grab the cookies, and instead of wanting to decorate it, he just wanted to eat them. And it would just send me into this period of grief, or this period of frustration or being upset. And now, so many years back, I realized how ridiculous that was. Like, Stetson was experiencing that how he wanted to. And I think we finally let go of the expectations, which he touched on, but we let go of our own expectations. And when we let him lead his expectations and what he wanted to do, we saw those glimmers of joy. We saw how much fun he had crumpling up a cookie or sticking his hand in a bowl of icing. And we learned to prepare for that. And I think that was really an important piece for us as a family, that we don't need to do everything a cookie cutter way, for no pun intended, but everyone experiences things differently. And you touched on just finding that joy where we can find it and preparing for for the unexpected. I think as families with individuals with Angelman syndrome, we're always preparing for the unexpected. We always have something on the back of our mind, which is a big mental load as well. Like, how do you recommend kind of taking sometimes a break from this mental load? I think the primary parent carries so much of it. What advice would you give families to break it up a little bit, or to be able to ask your significant other, if you have one, or a family member, to just help with that when it's hard to ask for help?
Well, and I think one of my greatest hits that I always talk about is just collecting data points over the years, and when you went into those cookie parties, you had to collect data points of how Stetson was going to react, and, how do we control the chaos? How do we modify the plan? And with family members, you're going to learn the ones that, for better or for worse, say that they want to help, but then really don't want to get dirty, and maybe they can help by bringing you a meal, or just checking in on the other kids, or I think you have to learn people's strengths and learn people's weaknesses. But one of the gifts of being a special needs parent is you have to learn to ask for help. You have to learn to say, I need my village. I can't do this all by myself. And it really is a huge glimmer for me to see the people who want to help me and to receive the help. It just warms my heart so much. And I see all the good in the world. And so I think allow yourself to ask for help. And then we can't focus on quantity of time, because let's be honest, moms don't get a lot of breaks. And over the holidays, all the kids are off school. You're not going to have a large quantity of time. Mm-hmm. So try to focus on quality of time. And this is stolen from another podcast, but I heard somebody say, like, well, people are always telling me I need me time. And what even is me time? And they described it as, well, it's nobody needs me time. Yeah. It's a time when I can have a predictable break. And, I know it's hard, but if you can try to work with a spouse or a parent and say, like, I need a half an hour of nobody needs me time each morning before you're going into one of these big holiday gatherings, which will be really overstimulating, and then switch off and they can have nobody needs me time too. But our brains need silence and predictability to recharge. And so stare at a white wall for 20 minutes if you have to, or try not to distract yourself with your phone. Try to use music or, some of your other senses, but make time for nobody needs me time too, because that's a gift to ourselves.
That's beautifully said, perfectly said, because, we hear so much now about mental health and taking self-care. And, if you fall into the trap of what's out there on like social media and whatnot, it's spa days or girls' weekends or parents' weekends. And then it's just another kind of gut punch that's not always a possibility for those in our community. And there's so many other ways we can get little self-care that don't have to, again, live up to these expectations of what maybe society is telling us self-care is, but an extra long shower one day or a 5-minute walk outside. But the no me time is beautiful, perfectly said, especially for those of us who have other children, not just our individual with Angelman syndrome, or even adult parents. I think, we need to recognize that this is a different time for them too. And being able to experience the holidays maybe as typical grandparents are different for them.
Hey guys, it's Amanda here. As you know, we're here for you, our community. If you have questions about any topics we can discuss in our podcast, Or if you have ideas for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. All you need to do is email me at dearamanda@angelman.org. Thank you so much for listening and your continued support of the Angelman Syndrome Foundation.
How would you recommend, we've talked a little bit about like newly diagnosed and whatnot, but how would you recommend families who are in that stage of they want to be grandparents, but they still are a caregiver of an adult with AS? How do they set expectations for these holidays?
Well, I think that people genuinely want to help over the holidays. And, a lot of times when they ask us what we want for the holidays, we answer with physical items, but it's okay to answer with, what I would love? I would love, if you could take my child to the movies, if you could come over and stay here so I could go for a longer walk, maybe try to allow people to gift you things the holidays, but it can be something that recharges your soul more than, is a physical item around the house. And there is a gift to being horizontal, I always say. Like anytime that we can, even if, your individual with Angelman's is in the room with you, even if you can lay down and, be somewhere where you can be horizontal and just kind of put away the worries of the world for a couple of minutes. I know it's an advanced skill. I can't even do it all the time. But unfortunately, you're going to have to take your breaks when you can get them, even if there's nobody there to give you the break. Sometimes that's where technology comes in handy.
Yes. We have no judgment on screen time over here. Do what you have to do to survive, especially when schedules are not regulated and routine is not expected during these seasons. You touched on this idea of what a gift it is that we have to be able to ask for help. And you're so right. As someone who grew up fiercely independent, at times my husband says I'm too independent. And it's hard to ask for help. Do you ever talk to people about how do you just take that first step and saying, I can't do this all by myself and I need help, especially at this time. December is a time where we need to not overextend ourselves. How do we who do we ask for help?
Yeah.
What are your recommendations there?
Well, one of my life mottos is you always have to find the advantage and the disadvantage. And like you said, nobody wants to learn how to ask for help. But the way that we learn that we need to ask for help is through very uncomfortable emotions, but very helpful emotions of depression and anxiety. And as you feel your depression, your anxiety building and building, those are your emotional pain receptors, just like we have physical pain receptors. If we put our hands on a hot stove, it tells us move those hands really quickly so we don't do damage. That's what your depression and your anxiety are saying to you. So, after one sleepless night, usually, we just push through. After two sleepless nights, maybe we push through a little bit more, but there is a point where our whole body and our emotional pain receptors are working together to say, like, we can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I know it's hard to get help through respite. And if you are, experiencing these things and saying, I need more help, like it's not a snap your fingers and solve over day. It's take out a notebook, write it down, like start this immensely difficult process of finding people that you would trust to help you. But in the meantime, look to the family members, and again, make it in small increments that could be successful. Mm-hmm. And if you do have somebody in the house that you feel is capable of helping you more, I would start with them, because I'm going to be incredibly stereotypical here, but oftentimes the moms have all the emotional caseload of working with the holidays and making it magical. And that plus our average everyday care can just be our emotional pain receptors going crazy, saying this is too much, this is too much. So figure out what that other person's strengths is and utilize that, but don't be afraid to be honest.
Yeah.
Too.
And it's hard. It's hard to be honest, again, anytime, but especially during the holiday season when sometimes you do just want to curl up in a ball, or you are experiencing the grief, as you mentioned, that we need. One thing I want everyone in our community to hear and to figure out is how to find your joy. How do you find the spark, the thing that fills your cup, as you said, or makes you just feel and sit back and remember. And I think a lot of times seeing the world through our kids or adults' eyes is a great way to do that. But where else do you find that someone can find joy in this time when it's hard? It's hard to find it. It's hard to see it.
Well, again, I can't speak for anybody else because this is the bad news about that. There's nobody's recipe that you can follow but your own. If I tell you to stare at a white wall, that might drive some people crazy. That was my recipe. Other people, it is, the cookie making, it's the time, doing the traditions. And maybe that's asking somebody to stay with, your angel so you can bring neurotypical children to do things that brought you joy in the past that would be a little difficult. I know a lot of times, regulating body temperatures can be really hard. So when you're out in the snow where we live, that would be possibly even dangerous to bring your angel along with you. So just figuring out your recipe for what brings you joy is a lifelong process that we all have to go through. But as crazy as it is, when you have a really good day, take out a notebook and write it down because, that joy is so precious and you don't want to take it for granted either.
That's a great idea, is to make sure we remember what it was, what that day was, and what it looked like. I know you deal with a lot and but you talk to a lot of families that have more than one child and more than just their individual with Angelman syndrome. And I feel like this is a time where a lot of families say they just struggle finding the balance or finding the boundaries between what they can and can't do because of their child with Angelman syndrome. And how do you recommend parents handle that with their neurotypical children and the siblings, that it's okay for them maybe to be upset that they're going to miss something, but how do we make sure that they're not feeling either left out or they're not feeling resentment at this time because if they have to miss something or if they have to leave early because of their sibling?
Yeah. I think that is a hard one because what I know from being at the Angelman conference and seeing the other families, it is a superpower that you're giving these neurotypical siblings, this empathy, this understanding about the way the world works. I always say if every person could be a sibling of a non-neurotypical brother or sister, the world would be a better place. But in the time when they're especially teenagers or preteens, and they won't understand that, and you can't expect them to understand it right now. So I think if they're really small, my recommendation is get down on their level, be kind of eye to eye and just validate. Don't try to, make them sound like they're being a brat. Don't try to, tell them to stop complaining about it. Just say, I know it's really hard. And, is there anything that we can do to make this better? Ask them an open and question. If they say well, we could stay the whole time, then you could even say next year, maybe if this is really important to you, we can plan ahead of time and I can make sure that somebody stays with your brother or your sister, and that way we can extend it a little. But for right now, this is what we're going to have to do this year. But I do understand it's really hard. So it's easier said than done. I know all of this takes a lot of patience, and then we don't really have the patience at the end of the holidays. So right. If there are times when you do snap, then go make amends. Teach them the gift of, later on saying, I'm sorry I wasn't as understanding as I should have been. But again, let's use these data points for next year because the past isn't cement. We can't do anything about that.
Smart. I told my husband the other day, I feel like I apologize to my children daily, because we are all just kind of on high alert right now and emotions run high. But I love it to validate their responses because you're right. They are experiencing this, and sometimes for the very first time they're experiencing it. And everyone's different. They're going to go through different expectations and all of that. And I think just the last thing I want to touch on is just managing and handling these family expectations and giving us as a community the power to say no and just it's complicated. Family gatherings can be complicated, you know. Sometimes we're running around trying to make sure not just our individual with Angelman syndrome is going to knock over the most precious holiday sentimental thing your great grandmother had, but your neurotypical children too. And so I think this is good for any parent, not just those of us with in the community, but like how do we handle or ask on certain, like if we need certain accommodations? We talked about radical honesty, but if what are some ways that families can just lay out to their extended family or friends, wherever their gatherings might be, of, hey, to make X, Y, and Z easier for us, can you do the following? Like, do we just continue? Do we just take this radical honesty approach and apply it to literally everything we have? Or do you have anything for that?
I mean, I think absolutely we do take radical honesty and apply it to everything. But I think there's also a flexibility and a planning part of it. And if you do have a partner or a spouse and can have a conversation, this is probably the week to do it because it gets even crazier. Make 15 minutes, a half an hour this weekend to just say like, hey, let's talk about the holiday plan. What can we do to make it better? Is there anything that I call it futuristic catastrophizing, like thinking about the future and being like, this is going to go horrible. Well, let's figure out a plan. If it does, how we get out of it. And then what can we do ahead of time to make that not happen? Yeah. And so you don't want to show up at your family's doorstep at 4 p.m. and say, by the way, hide all the breakable items. But if it is important to you, then 2 weeks ahead of time, ask them, by the way, when we're coming over, would you mind doing this? Because people tend to be very accommodating when you're giving them time to prepare. But it can be triggering when it's at the last minute, or dietary restrictions. Like that's another great one. Or pack your own food, like again, figure out what's in my control, what's out of my control, and try to take control over the pieces that you can. And then again, with the advantage and the disadvantage, I will tell you that from trying to have perfect Christmases past, the ones that weren't perfect are my favorite stories now, and remind yourself that like current you may be mortified that, your child broke something, but later on you will laugh about it. And people tell you their true feelings about things or show their true colors. That's what I'm trying to say in those moments. And the people who are so understanding, really, you get to look and say, well, those are my people.
Those are the ones that can continue to ask for help going forward. That's my message right there.
Yeah, exactly.
If we had to do some wrap up and key takeaways, we've got radical expectation or radical honesty.
Yeah.
Radical expectations as well.
Well, we can combine that. Set realistic expectations, set boundaries, ask ahead of time for things, use radical honesty, tell people how it feels to be you. And then, give yourself the gift of asking for help from others and also the gift of controlled time for yourself. Nobody needs me time, maybe a half an hour before a big event, and if you can, or get up 20 minutes earlier that day and just, do what you need to do to give your brain a little recharge time.
Yeah, which I know is hard when we don't, if families are dealing with lack of sleep. I know that 20 minutes is hard, but even if it's just getting up and laying on the couch downstairs by yourself for 20 minutes before the day starts, before your other kids come and ask you 800 questions, or before it is beneficial in the end, you're not starting your day off so rough and so manic. But I love it. This is great. And thank you so much for everything. And for those of you who would like to talk to Shannon more, you can go onto our website and go under resources and you will see counseling and you can find the way to connect with her. And she is so wonderful and so responsive and will get you in. So if all of this is starting to really hit home and you're feeling like, wow, maybe, like you said, your mental pain points, your anxiety and your depression, you're noticing those things kind of triggering and going off, we highly recommend that you get in touch with Shannon. So our website, counseling services, it's under there for you. Anything else you would like to add before we head out?
Nope, just happy holidays. And, please reach out if anybody needs me. And it was so great talking to you today.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, we wish everyone a happy holidays. And just know it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. We're here for you.
Thanks for listening to the ASF podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support us, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating or review. And please don't forget to subscribe.